What's up guys, Justin here with the Rhino Essentials. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how to model a floor plan in Rhino. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. All right, so when you first open up Rhino, you're going to get a window that looks something like this. And I don't know that we've talked too much about this, but basically if you go into new right here, you can pick the template with the units that you want. And so in this case, we're probably going to model in feet and inches, but notice how this tells you kind of the size. So in this case, for building objects the size of a truck or larger, where if you have smaller objects, it says building objects the size of a truck or smaller. So in this case, I'm going to pick large objects, feet and inches. If you use like metric or something like that, you can just pick those units. But I'm going to click on that, and that's going to open up a window, a workspace that we can work in. And so what we want to do is we want to start by bringing in a reference image. Now you don't have to bring in a reference image, but I'm going to just because it makes modeling a little bit easier. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to double click on this top button right here in order to pop out this window in order to make it larger. And so the first thing you need to do is you need to bring in that image. There's a function built into Rhino called picture that you can type in and hit enter in order to access that. And in this case, I've got a floor plan file that I want to bring in. So, and I'll make this available. I will link to it in the notes down below if you want to download it and follow along. It's a very simple floor plan that I've worked with for a while, but we're just going to double click in order to bring that in. And so notice what I can do at that point is I can place this. And so what it's asking for is the first corner of my picture. And I might toggle on grid snap just so I can place this on the grid, but I'm going to single click and move my mouse. And notice when I do that, that's bringing my picture in like this. Now, when we do that, we can try to get this as close to regular scale as possible. It's actually a little bit difficult in this viewport because there's no dimensions or anything. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bring this image in. So just click somewhere and we're going to scale the image. And so to do that, what we're going to need, and I'm going to toggle grid snap off just by clicking this button right here, is we need a line that's to the length that we want our image to be scaled to so that we can use that as kind of a base point. So right now, for example, if I was to draw a line in here, so I'm just going to type in line, and then I'm just going to click and move my mouse kind of to the end here. Notice how this has a length at the moment of like 23 feet, 6 inches. You can see it in this kind of like lower side right here. Well, that's not an accurate length in here. So what I need to do is I need to take a line, and so I'm just going to draw a line. I'm just going to type in line, and I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to type in a value that's accurate. So in this case, I'm going to move my mouse in this direction. I'm going to type in a value of 57 foot, 10.5 inches. I'm going to hit the enter key. And so notice what that did is that drew a line in here, and I'm going to hit the enter key in order to close out that tool. Well, now what we need to do is we need to scale this image up so that it matches the length of this line. And so to do that, what you can do is you can type in scale. So when you do that, that's going to activate the scale tool, and we want to mouse over an image and click on it to select it. Notice how it tells us to select the ones to scale, and we're going to hit enter when we're done. Now it's going to ask us for a base point. And so in this situation, I'm just going to pick a base point right here. So I'm just going to click. Now it's going to ask for a reference point. And in this situation, I want my reference point to be whatever the end of the dimension that we want to be 57 foot, 10.5 inches. So I'm just going to click in order to set this point. Well, now notice what this is going to do is this is going to uniformly scale our image up like this. So we're basically resizing this image so that it's to scale. Now, if I was to come in here and just type in a line, then draw a line that's 57 foot, 10.5 inches, notice how it now matches up with the length of this image right here. So we know that this is now to scale and we can start modeling. Now, one thing that I recommend when modeling with reference images is you want to make sure that you're actually typing in the dimensions. So this first line, for example, it's 45 foot, 10.5 inches. So if I activate the line tool, and actually I don't want to use the line tool, I want to use the polyline tool because that allows me to add multiple points. But if I was to pick this corner, and we want to try to be as precise as we can with the resolution that we have, if I was just to move my mouse like this and click on this point right here, notice how this may not be exactly to scale. We're close, but it's showing me this is 45 foot 10. So when we're doing something like this, we want to type in a value that's the actual dimension that we want this to be based on the dimensions on the page. So I'm going to type in a value of 45 foot, 10.5 inches and hit the enter key. And I'm going to hit the enter key again, but notice that I have my ortho snapping turned on. What ortho snapping means is it means it's going to snap to these 90-degree increments, which is perfect for modeling a house like this. Now, if you need to come off of that for some reason, you can hold the shift key on your keyboard, but we don't. So we're just going to keep typing in values. So I'm going to type in 18 foot, 4 inches, and hit the enter key. And notice how you need to hit the enter key twice in order to place this. But now I'm going to type in 12 foot, hit the enter key again, and then I'm going to click and drag my middle mouse button in order to pan. I'm going to type in a value of 13 feet. And in this case, notice how I can actually use inferencing in here in order to set that length. You want to make sure that you've got the O snap turned on so that your inferencing is snapping in here at the bottom of the page. But when I do that, notice how I can just move my mouse in this direction and I can just find this point and I can inference off of this point. And so I'm actually going to click off of that polyline for a second and delete this curve because it's kind of getting in the way. But then I'm going to activate the polyline function again, and I'm just going to find this point and click. And notice how I can use my inferencing in here. And notice how this is 57 foot, 10.5 inches. You can see it down in the corner right here. But then you can close this whole thing in by clicking and hit the enter key. And so one thing that I didn't do that I recommend that you do is you want to take this image and you actually want to put it on a layer. And so you can find the layers by clicking in this little like pie looking thing over here on the right hand window. If you don't see that window, you can just go to Window, Panels, Layers right here. And what I want to do is I want to right click in here. I'm going to add a layer and I'm going to call it Floor Plan Image. And what I want to do is I want to take this image right here and I want to hop over into the properties of the object and I want to put this on the floor plan image layer right here just by clicking the drop down, going over into layer. So what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to toggle that image on and off so that I can see my walls. Well, in this case, what I want to do is I want to take all of those walls. And notice how if I click and drag this, by the way, it's going to move around. So what I want to do is I want to click on the lock button. So when I lock it, notice how I can't click and move it around anymore. So we want to lock that layer once we put our image on it. But now I just want to take all of these edges and I want to use a tool called offset. So I'm going to type in offset, hit the enter key, and notice how you can use this to offset in a certain direction, either in or out. And so you can type D and then type in a value. So in this case, I'm going to say 6 inches in order to set that offset distance. But then notice how I can set it so that it offsets in or out. And I'm just going to click on the inward direction. We'll go ahead and toggle this floor plan image off again, just like this. And so now we have an inner wall and an outer wall. All right, so now we've got all of our edges created in here. And what I want to do is I want to take those edges and I want to extrude them to 3 dimensions. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the edges like this. And notice how I double clicked to go into your multiple different views or your multiple different windows view. And now what I want to do is I want to extrude these. So I want to type in extrude curve or extrude CRV like this. And so what this is going to do is this is going to let me extrude this to whatever height that I want. And so in this case, we're going to say that this maybe has a height of 10 feet. So we'll just type in a value of 10 feet, hit the enter key. Now, one thing that we did in here that it's kind of important, and I'm actually going to undo this. So we're going to do extrude curve again. Notice how there's an option in here for solid. And so if you click on the option for no, what this is going to do is this is going to create this as a hollow shape with no face on the tops of the walls. But if you click on yes, or if you type in S and hit enter, it's going to create this object as a solid. And so what that means is I'm going to type in a value of 10 feet. And so that means if we look at the top of this wall right here, notice how it's filled in. So this is a solid shape. So you want to make sure that you set solids to yes. And so now what we want to do is we want to cut openings for our doors and windows. And so this is where we can kind of utilize having both a 3D view as well as a 2D view. And so in this situation, I don't really have dimensions for my windows. And so because we don't have a length in here, we need to measure something. And so to measure something, what we want to do is there's multiple different options in here for measurement in the analyze function at the top of the page. But in this case, we don't necessarily want length, even though it seems like you would want length, because what that does is that allows you to select a curve, and then it'll give you a measurement of the length of the entire curve. In this case, we actually want the distance function. And so the distance function is going to allow you to set a point. And so in this case, we can just let this snap to this corner point. I'm going to move my mouse down, and notice how at the bottom of the page down here, you can see the length right here. So you can actually see that live in your tool. You can see how this window is 2 foot 5 inches off of this wall. And same with this door, we could do the same thing. So we could do an analyze, we could do a distance, and I'm going to click from here to here, and I can see how this is about 8 foot 6 inches off of this wall right here. And so what we want to do is we want to model out the opening of the door and cut an opening in the wall. And so a good way to do this is to actually use the rectangle function, because what the rectangle function is going to do is it's going to let you set a point. So in this case, I'm going to set this point right here, and I want to draw a rectangle. And so notice how I'm having trouble getting this to snap to the proper wall over here. I'm not sure if there's a way to get that to snap a little bit better. I mean, you could obviously put like you could put a C-plane on there, but I don't really want that. What I'm going to do instead is notice how I can move my mouse with this right view. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a value of 3 feet, hit the enter key, and then I'm going to type in a value of 7 feet. And what that's going to do is that's going to create a rectangle that's 3 foot by 7 foot. And in this case, what we need to do is we need to move this over so that it aligns with where this door would be on our wall. Now you can click and drag to do this if you want to, but in this situation, what I'm doing is I'm kind of clicking and dragging a little bit just to figure out what the distance is that this is moving over. So in this case, it's looking like this is going to move about 9 feet. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the gumball and click on this little arrow right here. Note that if you don't see the gumball, you can click on the button for a gumball at the bottom of the page. But I can single click on this right here, type in a value of 9 feet, and hit the enter key. And what that's going to do is that's going to take this door and it's going to cut an opening in the wall right here. So now I've got this door or this rectangle that's blocking out where my door should go. Well, in this case, I want to use a tool called wire cut. So I can type in wire cut, and I've already got my rectangle set, but now it's going to ask me what I want to cut. I'm going to click on my wall, I'm going to hit the enter key, and I'm just going to move my mouse so that this is past this wall right here in order to cut the opening. And notice how it shows me a preview of what's going to be cut out. This works great, so we're going to hit the enter key. Well, notice what that did is that cut an opening for our door right here. So now we've got an opening that we can use to put our door in. And so we're going to do the same thing for the other openings that are in here. So in this case, these windows, I'm going to do a quick analysis and see that if I click between this point and this one right here, it's 4 feet wide. So I just need to draw a rectangle that's going to be 4 feet wide by probably, we can say 4 feet tall. So we're just going to come in here and we're just going to draw another rectangle on this surface, and we'll start on this corner, and we'll just draw on this surface, or we're going to type in a value of 4 feet and hit the enter key, and then 4 feet and hit the enter key. And so that gives me this rectangle right here. And so in this case, what I want to do is I want to select this object, and instead of using the gumball, I'm going to type in the move command, because that's going to allow me to set a base point right here, and then a target point. So notice how I clicked and then clicked again. Now this is aligned with my wall, and I'm ready to move it to align it with where this actual window would go. So in this case, it looks like we're going to need to move about -2 foot 11. So we'll just click and type in -2 foot 11 inches and hit the enter key. And then we're going to move this up because this needs to be off the ground. And so in this situation, what I want to do is I want to move this object. So I typed in move, and I'm going to click on this corner, move my mouse up, and I want to use the inferencing that comes off of this edge in order to set the height, because I want this to be the same height at the top as my window right here. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a couple copies. So remember that you can tap the Alt key with this move tool active in order to create a copy of an object. Notice how the little plus shows up right here, but it looks like this is going to be -4 foot 8 inches. And so we're going to do that again. We're going to tap the Alt key and we're going to move this -4 foot 8 inches. So now I've got these 3 windows in here. Well, I can use the wire cut command in order to cut openings in the wall. And actually, I think that you can select all 3 of these. So if I click and drag across here, I can use wire cut with all of those. So we're just going to click in here, click across this, and hit the enter key to finalize, and that's going to give us our windows. All right, and so you can continue this process all the way around the outside of the model. I'm not going to make you watch me do that in this video. Now let's talk just a bit about modeling out our doors and our windows and how you can create those, because those require a little bit of additional modeling in here. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got this curve, which was a rectangle. And what we need to do is we need to use this curve in order to model a door. So notice if I move this around, it's just kind of a separate curve in here. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to model out our frame. And so to model out our frame, what we're going to do is we're going to remove this bottom edge. And so to do that, you can use the function delete sub curve. And so what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to pick a point on this line. So we're going to click right here, we're going to click right here, and what that's going to do is that's going to remove the bottom edge of our curve. So now if you look at this, notice how this is just a simple, it's basically a 3-sided box right here. And now what I want to do is I want to inset all of those edges in order to create some thickness. And so what I want to do is I'm going to use the offset function. So I'm going to type in offset with these selected. Notice how I can use that to offset this out or in. And so one thing I want to do is I want to type the D key and hit enter, and then I want to type in an offset distance, which in this case I'm going to say is 2 inches, and this actually set it to 2 feet. So you want to make sure that you set this to 2 inches like this. Notice how you can move your mouse out or in order to do this. In this case, I want to move it in. Now, one thing you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that you select the option for cap. And so when you cap this, we're just going to select the flat option right here. When you cap this, what it's going to do is it's going to fill in the end right here. And so what I'm doing in this situation is I'm just going to hit the enter key, and what that's done, once I do that, is now I've got this frame shape. And notice I can click in here and it's basically a curve. And so what I want to do is I want to extrude this. So we're just going to do an extrude curve, and we're going to extrude this to the back side of our wall right here. Notice how you can move your mouse in this top view in order to snap this to the back side of your wall. Now, you could come in here and get a little bit more complex with this and model out a piece of trim, that kind of thing, if you wanted to. We're not going to worry too much about that for right now, but notice how we've got our extrusion right here, which is going to be our door frame. Well, now what I want to do is I want to model out my door. And in this case, I'm assuming that my door is going to kind of hang off the back of this object right here. So what we can do is we can just model that out using probably, we'll use the polyline function. So I'm going to type in polyline. I'm going to find this back corner on the floor. And you can kind of move your mouse over it and click here in order to select it. But I'm going to type in a value of 2'8". right here. And I'm going to hit the enter key. And you have to hit the enter key twice on that. But then I'm going to type in a value of 2 inches right here. Hit the enter key again. And then I'm just going to move my mouse and I'm just going to click here and click here in order to finish that up. And what I can do is I can just extrude this up to the height of my frame. So we're just going to do an extrude curve right here. We'll extrude this up to the height like this. So now we've got a door in here. And from this point, if you wanted to, you could come in here and you could pick your extrusion. And if you did need to close your door or have your door be closed, you could rotate that in order to do that. And you can rotate it here, or you could also use the rotate function and rotate it this way. Just kind of depends on what you're trying to do. But now I've got my door in here, and we would do something very similar with our windows. And so one thing that I might recommend in this situation, you're probably not going to be moving this around too much, but you could always select all of this and type on the option to group. And so when you group it, basically what it's going to do is it's going to take the 2 extrusions and put them in a single group so that they're kind of linked together. So if I move this, you can see this moving around in here. And so let's do the same thing with our windows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by drawing the outside of our frame. So we'll type in rectangle, find this corner point, and again you can see if I mouse over this point right here, and remember that our curves are still here for our windows, so we can just kind of do that same thing. So we're going to do an offset, and in this case I probably don't want this to be 2 inches. That's probably a little bit thick for our window. So maybe we'll type in a D and type in 1 inch. Hit the enter key. And so we're going to click, actually. The enter key isn't really working. And so what that does is that gives us kind of the outside of our window frame right here. And we can extrude that. And I'm just going to select this. We're going to do an extrude curve in order to get the outside frame of our window. And so now let's add a simple piece of glass. And remember that the curves that we used in order to create this are still in here. So what you can do is you can select these curves. And in this case, I'm going to move that curve so that it's at the middle of this object right here. And so we're just going to type in a value for move. You can click, and I'm just going to move this to the midpoint right here. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to extrude this curve, but I want to extrude it in both directions. We're going to click on the option for both sides. So notice what that does is that extrudes this out. And in this case, we can use just this image right here in order to figure out how thick or where the 2 double glass panes might be in this object. And so now we've got our glass and we've got our frame, and we can take those 2 objects, and I'm just going to do a shift click in order to pick up the second one. And I'm going to group them. And I'm going to type in copy on my screen. And I'm just going to go find this point. I'm going to click, and I'm going to create and copy. And then I can do the same thing over here. So I'm just going to right click in order to repeat that movement. Click again and move my mouse over like this. And so now I've got 3 windows in here. All right, and then from there, you're just gonna continue this process, going through and modeling out the rest of your interior walls, as well as your interior openings using the tools you already have from this video. So if you have any questions about anything we talked about, feel free to leave them down below. In the next video, we're gonna talk a little bit about modeling the exterior of a building. But as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.